Hello everyone, my name is Chef Pittman. Welcome to Kitchen Science. This is our first video that we are offering, and today we are going to talk about buying knives. So if you look out in front of me here, I have several different knives as options. I've been a chef for about 25 years, among other things that I've done in my career, and I've kind of learned the do's and the don'ts of what you should have for knives. So I've come to realize that there are probably 4 basic tools that you need to go ahead and get about 95 to like 98, 99% of the work done in your home kitchen or even in a professional kitchen. So I want to start talking with you about those now. So if we look down here, these are the knives I'm going to talk about today. This is a honing steel. This is a serrated bread knife. This is a German style chef's knife. This is a Japanese inspired German handled chef's knife. This is a Santuko. This is a paring knife. And this is a tornado knife, also called bird's beak knife, literally translates into sheep's foot. And then this right here is a Cleaver by Global. The main reason that I have all of these out today is because I want to talk to you about your basic needs for what you're going to need. If you're only going to buy one knife, my recommendation is that you buy a chef's knife and or Santuko. You want to get something that allows you to get majority of your work done. So if we look at the basic anatomy of a blade, okay, this is a Wüsthof wide, heavy. It's completely solid all the way through. And what you'll notice about this is this knife has something called full tang. Full tang refers to the fact that the blade all the way through the handle is connected. And if we flip it all the way around here, we can see that as well. If we continue to look at the anatomy of the blade, we see that we have this plastic composite handle. We have rivets running all the way through. Next to that, we have our bolster and our heel. The benefit about a knife that is set up this way, which is a little bit differently than this one, is this is a forged heel, and you'll notice it's a little bit thick. The benefit of doing this is if you actually need to cut through, say, a chicken bone, you can use the back of the blade here and literally cut right into the product that you're looking for. Attached to that, we actually have our blade. Now this is an 8-inch knife. This is what is called a dual-sided blade. So that means that it's sharpened on this side and it is sharpened on this side. If we continue to compare it back to this knife, our Japanese inspired German handled Miyabi, you'll notice that it does not have that forged tip here. Now the benefit for a lot of people is this forged area here, this extra thick metal, is difficult to sharpen. So even the best knives in the world at some point in time are going to need to be sharpened. Every knife I've ever owned, I've had to sharpen it a bunch. So when it comes down to sharpening one of these, and it's a little bit hard to see, but if you look there, you can see that there's a little bit of extra work that had to go in to actually grinding all of this down so that it was a knife-like surface like the rest of the blade, so that it would be just as usable as the rest of the blade. Okay, so again, my opinion, pick one of these to be the first knife that you're going to buy. It does not have to be this brand. This is Wüsthof, this is Miyabi. This is a personal favorite of mine called Mac. I'll get into that here in a little bit. So if you're only going to go ahead and spend $100 to $150, this is sort of a knife range that you can go ahead and see. I think I paid $96 for this. This was $130, and this was $165. So, and they're all quite old. So this is probably 17 years old. This is probably closer to 9 years old, and this is about 12 years old. So they've all been around for a while, but they are definitely good money for value. And I'll leave a link in the description telling you where you can find a lot of these and a couple of good websites that you can pick them up at. The next one we're going to go ahead and talk about is a bread knife or a serrated knife. Now, a lot of people have the ability to buy bread at the grocery store that is always sliced. So a lot of people don't actually look at this as being a very, very useful blade. One of my favorite things to use it for is to actually cut fruit. I like to go ahead and clean pineapples with this, clean different types of muskmelons with this, different types of citrus, and cut bread, obviously. But the benefit to it, unlike a lot of these, is these serrations. When you're cutting into something, you almost have to use a sawing motion that goes back and forth. And that actually gives you a little bit more control because you can actually stop in the cut. When you're using a standard sized blade, you're literally pushing all the way through and relying more on the blade and the sharpness of the blade. Where with this guy, you're sort of doing that sawing back and forth. So in my opinion, you have a little bit more control as you're going through and you're doing that sawing. So again, this is number 2, and this is another option, again, that's gonna run you, if you need to pick up a second, this is probably gonna run you somewhere in $130 to $140 range, depending on where you go and time of year and sales and whatnot. Third option is going to be a paring knife. Now I picked 2. This is a 3.5 inch. This is a 2.5 inch. And this is a 2 3/4 inch. And you'll notice the big difference between these. This is basically a smaller version of a chef's knife almost. If you look at the anatomy here, it doesn't have the bolsters in it. It doesn't have the rivets in it, but it still has the bolster. It doesn't have the forged teal, but in some like this one, you actually see that you can actually get that involved in there. The benefit for using something like this is doing small and intricate work. For example, you can use this knife to clean strawberries all day long, but it's actually a little bit easier if you use the smaller knife because it allows you to do a little bit more intricate work. So it makes a little bit more sense. In the realm of a tournée knife, this knife is designed for peeling. One of the things that I like doing with this knife the most is I actually like to peel the skin off of onions, peel the skin off of mangoes. It was initially designed so that you could flute mushrooms. You hold it like this and you kind of bend it back and forth like so. So when you are looking at the different knives that you can get, you want to think about their functionality. If it was me going forward, I'd probably go ahead and just stick with the standard 3.5 inch paring knife. But if I was doing a lot of hand peeling like a lot of people do, then I wood also go ahead and consider one of these. Now again, this knife is probably sitting around the $120 range, and this one's probably sitting more around the $100 range. This is a Woodstock brand, and this is a Shun brand, as was our serrated. And the last item that you want to go ahead and utilize for your 4th pick is something to do basic maintenance. Now the basic maintenance we want to go ahead and start with is we want to use something called a honing steel. And honing steels are designed so that you can actually realign your blade. So if you look at a blade, if you look at a blade under a microscope, say 100x, it looks something like this. And it's got little peaks and valleys in it. And as you utilize that blade and you push it against the cutting boards and the various food products that you're using, it tends to go ahead and bend back and forth, like so. What this tool does is it allows you to go ahead and take that bent peak and valley and make it straight again. The misconception with this is that this tool will go ahead and allow you to sharpen. This does not sharpen. While it does have the ability to take away metal, it takes away a small amount of metal. So for this, you literally want to go ahead and run your blade across it on both sides equally so that you can get those peaks and valleys back to being straight. Okay, so with the steel, again, it's used for basic maintenance. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to have a knife using video, like a basic knife skills video to explain to you how to use all of these. But I want to just give you a basic understanding of how this guy works. So you want to take a towel, you want to take your steel, put it on your towel, and it's basically designed so that it doesn't move all over the place. You want to take your blade, you want to start at the back of the steel like so, and you kind of want to tilt it. 30-degree angle, 35-degree angle, 25-degree angle is fine. Just don't go at a 90. That would be bad. So you want to take it and you literally want to pull it until it runs all the way through. And then you want to do the same thing on the other side. So if I do it this way, you can kind of see how I'm doing it. Now, I would recommend that this is how you do this for the first few years of using your knives. When you get a little bit more comfortable, then you can do this. This is what you see a lot of chefs doing on TV. They're just very, very used to the tools that they have with them on a daily basis, and they know how to do this. When you're done, you want to go ahead and take your towel and you want to wipe any of that little bit of trace of metal that came off of here, that came in contact with here. You want to wipe that off. You want to do the same thing with your blade. Gently wipe it off and then put it down. Big no-nos for steels. These have a little bit of magnetic property to them. Not much, but a little bit. So you don't necessarily want to put them in an environment where they can stick to a magnet. Okay, so I wouldn't want to put them next to my refrigerator or even next to, like, say, an iron pan. where they could go ahead and be demagnetized over time. I generally like to try to keep these in an environment like this counter where there's not a lot of magnetism going on. You also don't ever want to wash these things. You don't want to run them through a dishwasher. You don't want to add a lot of water. They do have the tendency to rust over time. If you look at this one, it's quite old, but it definitely has some discoloration from all of the uses that it's gone through. And one last thing, when you buy a steel, you wanna take it and run it through your fingers, okay? And what I can show you here is if you look at the steel, if you check the tip here, and if you could feel this, you'd understand it's quite rough. As I get closer down, it's becoming a little bit smoother, but as I get down towards the bottom where it doesn't always hit a lot, it's getting to be a little bit more rough again. So steels, like knives, need to be taken care of, but over time, these are the type of things that do need to be replaced. I've probably had this for 12 years. I'm almost to the point where I need to go ahead and start thinking about changing it up and going to a different one. Last but not least, okay, I brought this out just for fun. I wanted to talk to you about meat cleavers. People often wonder, what is the point of these? Do I actually really need to buy one? Do I need to spend $185, which is what this thing cost? At the time when I needed a cleaver, I bought a good one, and I knew that I would have it forever. I knew it would be the only one that I would buy. This is not something that you need to get and utilize often. If you get to the point in your life where you are breaking down whole animals and you need to go ahead and be involved with bone, this is something that you want to go ahead and do. If you are a weekend warrior and you are breaking down chickens every weekend, maybe 2-3 times a month, you want to think about getting a tool that has these forged ends to it. That way you can cut down into that chicken bone and it makes life a little easier. If you are a vegetarian and you mainly just chop vegetables, you might want to go ahead and think about the thinner blades because they're going to make that work a little bit easier. I could use this blade to chop chicken, but if you look at the difference between this, there is a major, major difference in thickness between the German blade and the Japanese blade. And because of that, I don't want to hurt the blades by using them, so I try to pick the best tool. If you had to, you could pick an Asian blade like this and then get yourself a meat cleaver, and you'll notice that there's, again, a big difference between the thickness between those two. For my money, I deal with a lot more vegetables than anything else. I am a meat eater, I do consume a lot, but I probably chop more vegetables than anything for work. For me, I picked something called the Santuko. It's a little bit shorter, it's a 7-inch as opposed to the 8-inch options that we have here. But the reason that I like it is I like the blade. And more specifically than that, I like something called hardness. So Rockwell has a hardness scale. And when I buy knives, I buy knives for purposes. And one of the first things I look at when I'm buying my knives is, what is my hardness scale? And the rule of thumb is simple. The closer you are to 100, the harder you are. The closer you are to 0, the softer you are. I realize this may seem a little bit strange at first. Let me explain. When you buy knives, knives are sharpened at the factory. And in some cases, those factory sharpens are great and they can last months and months and months. If you use your steel, they'll last even longer. I've had knives last me 8 or 9 months in a professional setting before I ever had to sharpen them. And just to be clear, to sharpen means to take away metal. It does not mean to realign the blade. Realigning the blade, which is what this tool does, is just part of the process. So I try to pick blades that are nice and strong, but are also easy to sharpen at the same time. So on the Rockwell scale, I try to be somewhere in the 60s with my vegetable knives. So for example, my Mac knife here that I have, this is a 61. This is one of my favorite tools I've ever bought. If you remember earlier, I said I paid $96 for it, and I would pay for it again in a heartbeat. It is a great tool. I've only ever sharpened it 5 or 6 times in its entire life. In fact, I just recently did. And I'll go through videos on those as well as how to sharpen blades. But this is a great knife. It cuts through pretty much anything, but it does have its limitations. I won't cut anything harder than a potato with this knife. I won't even go after beets or celeriac or rutabagas because they're just too hard and I could end up hurting the blade. Now, some might argue with me on that, but I want to keep my blades and my knives as best as I can and as the highest quality as I can. Our Miyabi, which is another great knife, this is a little bit harder, Okay, this is a 63. And again, if you look at these two blades, their thickness is quite similar, but their blade category and their blade style and their hardness are just a little bit different. So this, again, I could cut through like a small rib chicken bone with it, and I'd probably be okay with it. I could definitely cut through a rutabaga with this, or a beet with this. I have many times before, so I'm confident that it'll be okay. But those extra 2 points here could offer a problem. They could offer a nick on the blade here. So I would nick this knife a little easier on those harder root vegetables than I would say on this knife. Okay, the next one we have are Shuns, and Shuns are even a little bit softer. So this is between a 60 and a 61, depending on what version you get. That includes this as well. This is also a Shun blade. But again, the benefits of the softer metals is that they sharpen a little bit easier and they sharpen a little bit faster. When I get into my lower blades, then I start getting into a little bit of problems. So for example, this is a 65. So now we're getting even harder here. And the problem with this guy is that the blade lasts for a good amount of time. Usually in between sharpenings in a professional setting, I can get 3 to 4 months while using my steel before I ever have to actually take metal away off of the blade. Now, the downside to this knife is you have to be really, really accurate when you sharpen it. And if you're not, you're gonna end up curving the blade. 2 reasons for this happen. 1, this occurs because the blade is much thicker down here at the bottom than compared to our Japanese style blades. And 2, it takes a lot more effort to go ahead and take this down than it does our Japanese style or our softer style metals. So we need to go ahead and do this more often, and we need to spend more time doing our sharpening. But the benefit of this is I can cut through a bone with this. A pretty substantial bone, like a chicken wing bone would be easy, or a duck wing bone would be easy for me to go ahead and take through with this knife. With my Asian style knives, I would not be comfortable doing that at all. Okay, then we have our globals. Our globals, they're even harder. They're even softer. These guys sit at a 57. Now, the reason that they've been able to make a cleaver out of this is normally global blades are not that thick. They're usually that thick. Sometimes they're even this thick. So the benefit of these blades is they sharpen really fast. In fact, there's even special methods marketed by Global of when you sharpen, you want to go in a circular motion. And the same holds true for this cleaver that I have here. So to recap, if you only have enough money to buy one knife, my recommendation is that you go for a type of chef's knife, whether it's a Western style, a Japanese style, whether it is going to be a pure Japanese style or it's going to be one of these hybrids where we have a Japanese steel and we have a Western style handle. Second to that, I would recommend getting a serrated because you will end up using it for a lot more things than you might think. Third would be some form of a paring knife, whether it was the straight 2.5 or it is our bird's beak style. And I include it in the 4 pieces, but I think that it's just as important. Even if you buy one knife, you still want to go ahead and make sure that you get yourself a steel, some kind of a honing device so that you can keep that blade nice and sharp. Well, that is it for me. Please leave your comments down. I'll link the tools that I have talked about here in today's video down in the subscription. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you.